Jack Day sold his dairy business in 1979, but continued to farm the land until this year when he entered a government program which prevents him from working the land for the next 10 years.
And I'm 68, so I probably will never see the end of that 10 years as a farmer. But it's been a wonderful 36 years here. Building this place was in a way like pioneering, and I really have enjoyed it. It's not anything very fancy, but it's a lot different than it was. When you think that I gave $8,000 for the farm, and there was nothing but an old red horse barn and a two-room house on it, it shows you what concentrated effort for 30 years can do. We just kept a building. We built a hay barn, and we built the calf barn, and we built so many things. The corral. None of that was here when we started.
Retirement for Jack, though, does not mean a life of leisure. Whether working in his garden, cleaning up around the farm, or learning Spanish for his next trip to Honduras, the purpose of these South American adventures is to drill water wells for the people of that underprivileged nation.
You know, life does go on after retirement. I'm in ham radio, and I really have enjoyed that. I went to Mexico City as a ham radio operator. I've always lived here by the side of the road, and we have a motto on the wall that said, let me live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man.
And we think that's exactly what Jack Day is.
Speed.
right, thanks. Oh,
Let me pause.
Okay, roll. Would you get off of it for me one more time?
Go.
Okay, go. Okay, how long have you been, what am I going to say?
I'll start out.
Okay. Go ahead.
Test 1, 2, 3.
There's a little sadness in this day. This is probably the last time that I will ever work the soil of this farm. After 36 years here, it's kind of hard to know that at least for the next 10 years, and probably never, because I'm 68 now, not likely that I will ever work this soil again. When I first moved here, there was just a little two-room house there with, we got our water from a windmill. All of the facilities were outside. There was nothing here that a person could be proud of. But I had decided long ago that I wanted to do something real in life. After World War II, I just could not bring myself to stay in the interior designing business. When I came back from New York, I knew I wanted to farm. And later on, after a little ag school, I decided that I wanted a dairy, because my teacher in Texas was a dairyman, and I got interested in the dairy business. So when my mother offered to sell me this place, I decided that I would move to Oklahoma. It's been a hard 36 years, but it's been very rewarding. I've loved every minute of it. I always thought that the dairy business was really demanding, and it was. But we had a wonderful time. It just filled your life. In fact, it filled it so much that I felt like that I had, Sheila, I felt like that I had become too self-centered. After 30 years, I began to feel that I wanted to do, that as soon as I was able to get out of the dairy business, that I wanted to do something for someone else for a change. Because, I don't know, the Lord just kind of worked on me a little bit, and I asked him what he wanted me to do, and I just told him that I would do anything he asked me to do. And that has caused me a lot of strange trails since then, but it's been wonderful. I've never been so happy in my life, and it's led me into a lot of strange places. I just wonder sometimes if we don't spend too much of our time thinking about making money, about we get too concentrated on our family, and we're going to have to cut today. Well, this is kind of a sad day. This is probably the last time that I'll ever work the ground on this farm. After 36 years, I have gone into a government program that allows me to put all of the farm into grass, and I won't be able to graze it or use it for 10 years. And I'm 68, so I probably will never see the end of that 10 years as a farmer. But it's been a wonderful 36 years here. You know, when we first moved here, we had been married 6 or 8 years. Betty and I met in Fort Worth Army Air Base. She was my teletype operator, and I was trick chief on WYWD, the radio station at Carswell Air Base. I was in the Air Force in a communications squadron. We had a wonderful group there, and I knew as soon as I had met Betty that she was the one that I was going to marry. Of course, I'm not sure she had that same idea, but eventually I kind of won her over, and we got married in the Army chapel there. She was a WAC, and I had just got back from overseas, so I had malignant malaria for 14 times. I was hospitalized for 14 times, so I only weighed 129 pounds. But it was a good wedding. We had all of our friends around us, and we went to live in a kind of a barracks that everybody called the roach-covered cottage, and we worked there at the air base until we got out. Then I worked around Fort Worth for a while, and then I decided that I wanted to fulfill an ambition that I'd had for years. In the 1 year that I'd gone to college, I had studied interior decoration, and I'd studied a book by Cheryl Whiten, who was the owner and manager of the New York School of Interior Decoration. So with the GI Bill of Rights in hand, we went to New York. It was quite an experience. We were there for a couple of years, going to school in downtown Manhattan, and I worked for Scully Galleries out on Long Island in Garden City. But after 2 years, I don't know, there was something unreal about the whole thing. It just, people had too much money. The people that I dealt with had too much money. The decorator that I worked with was not, I just felt like it wasn't the way I wanted to spend my life. So Betty and I came back to Texas, and I bought a little farm outside of Fort Worth, serving a sort of an apprenticeship. After a few years there, 6 years as a matter of fact, we decided that we would buy Mother's farm here in Oklahoma. And it had been rented for years, and there was only a 2-room house here. It had no running water. We got water from the windmill. No facilities inside the house. There was an old chick sale on the outside, and Betty was pregnant with our first child when we moved up here. So for 10 years we had a really difficult time. A lot of times we didn't know how we were going to pay our grocery bill, even though we lived out of a garden. And I was working in town, milking cows in the morning, working in town for 8 hours, and then coming back out and farming and milking cows and doing my farming on the weekend. But after about 10 years, the dairy cows began to show a profit. And I had long ago decided that I wanted to get into artificial insemination. The dairy business has been wonderful over these last 30 years because it was kind of like an explosion of technology. The pipeline came in, and the big tanks, and the artificial insemination, and it just I just lived it and ate it. It was a wonderful way to spend a lifetime, I thought. A lot of hard work, but it was so rewarding to to build things and to move dirt back and forth and to change the landscape and to build my house and put in the plumbing and things like that. It was like pioneering in a way. You know, this is the only generation that hasn't had somewhere to go and to be pioneers. When the pioneers reached the West and then turned around and come into Oklahoma, this was the last frontier. So I think there's a kind of a built-in frustration with my generation. We really had no place to go, and so I think building this place was in a way like pioneering, and I really have enjoyed it. The cows built everything that I have here. It's not anything very fancy, but it's a lot different than it was. When I sold out in 1979, it was I think it was just time for me to sell out, because it was probably the last good sale in the state of Oklahoma. I sold 165 head of cattle that I had bred myself artificially, and people flew in from all over the state and from Texas to buy these cattle. It grossed about $200,000, and when you think that I gave $8,000 for the farm, and there was nothing but an old red horse barn and a two-room house on it, it shows you what concentrated effort for 30 years can do. But it was a terrible loss. When I walked out the day after the sale, and there wasn't any cattle out there in the yard, it was like losing my children. We had raised 6 children, and they had all been involved in the dairy business. Each one of them, as they grew up, began feeding calves and cleaning up the corral and feeding the cows with the tractor, and we just kept a building. We built a hay barn, and we built the calf barn, and we built so many things. The corral, none of that was here when we started. And these children really learned how to work and what the value of a dollar was. I think it was really a wonderful way to raise children. Sometimes I don't think they think so. There was a lot of work involved in it. But it was, I know I've talked to several employers of the boys especially, and they've always remarked that the boys knew how to work. And they do. They learned that because they worked with Dad. You know, that's one of the problems today, I think. So many children don't even know what their dad does for a living. And that was one thing that was on my mind. When I was on the school board, we had 26% single-parent families. And I could see so many things happening in this world that I felt like when I had sold the cows and had time to do it, that I wanted to dedicate the rest of my life to changing, to helping to change some of the things that I felt needed changing. I think the Lord was working in my life. The last 6 or 7 years, I begun to realize just how self-centered my life was, and how I wanted to change that, but I didn't know how. I told the Lord that I would do anything He wanted me to do, but He needed to order my life and to tell me what He wanted me to do. You know, you should never say that unless you really mean it, because the Lord knows how to put you to work. Since then, I've got involved in missions, a jail mission here in Fairview. I've got involved in overseas missions. I've been down to Central America 5 times, and I was with the disaster unit that went to Mexico City during the earthquake. those were the kind of projects that lifted you up. And I really felt like that for once in my life I was right in the center of God's will. It was quite a change in my life. When I went to Mexico City, I saw all of that misery, all of that heartbreak. We fed about 4,000 people a day from our unit. And you'd go into the gymnasium, the Morales Gymnasium there in Mexico City, and you'd see all of these old people, the young babies whose fathers had been killed, the children who had no family, the old folks who had lost their children. Oh, and that gymnasium was so full of misery. But you know, as they came out to eat, there was a group from San Antonio there that spoke Spanish, and they played a guitar and sang, and they could smell the warm food, and you know, by the time they got through the line, they were actually smiling. And it was really a wonderful experience. Heartrending, but it just lifted you up. Since then, I've gone to Honduras 4 times and to Belize once. Honduras, the first time I went down, we organized a agricultural co-op down there and set them up in with a irrigation unit. You know, those people are not, the stereotype of Central American or Honduran is someone who sits in the shade all day and really has no ambition, but that is certainly not true. It's a false stereotype, because if they have work, they get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they take their machetes to the banana plantations, and they work all day till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they go home and work on their own garden. So they're hard working. But at Riatoka, they had never had anything to sell before. You know, once we got that irrigation unit going and got them organized, they sold 200 boxes of tomatoes into Tegucigalpa every week. And it just totally changed the life of the people in the Riatoka Valley. Things like that are so wonderful, and they make you really feel like that you had done something worthwhile. You know, life does go on after retirement. In fact, when you ask the Lord to use you, He certainly does. But my life has been full, even out here. I've never been so happy in my life. For a change, I don't have to think about whether I'm making money or not. And it's so wonderful to pour cement or to move a sand hill down into a mud hole and not have to think about an immediate return. I have a watermelon project that I do every year, and it's getting about time to plant those watermelons. But I've often thought how many people in the cities never have a chance to buy watermelon. Their income is low, and watermelon is a kind of a wonderful dessert, but too expensive for most people. So I give away my watermelons, and it's a lot of fun. People really do enjoy that as a dessert. And the Lord has really blessed my watermelon patch. If it wasn't for the coyotes, I could probably flood Fairview with watermelons. But that's a wonderful thing to do. And then I keep my garden going. I have probably 1/4 of an acre of garden, and we give away most of it. Up until this year, I had beef cattle. After I sold my dairy, I bought Simmentals. But we now have no cattle on the place, and so I keep myself busy planting flowers and moving the flower beds around and planting trees. And now that I'm going into this CRP program, I have 100 acres that I have to put to grass. And that's what I'm doing now, is working the land for the last time. And I really do enjoy plowing and things like that. It's to look back and see that earth turning over and to smell the freshness of the soil, and it just tends to elevate your thoughts. We really, I'm a dyed-in-wool farmer, I guess. I love farming, and I always have. But with my jail mission and the other things that I do, I'm in ham radio, and I really have enjoyed that. I went to Mexico City as a ham radio operator, and we have a disaster relief unit that feeds people, and I'm one of the radio operators in that group. And then I work with the civil defense in our RACES group, which is Radio Amateur Emergency Service. And it's good to get on the air and talk to my fellow hams around the world. And every Sunday I have 2 nets that I get into, a Baptist radio amateur group, of which I'm president, and then the RACES net, which I cooperate with whenever we have an emergency. So it's very rewarding. I've enjoyed it so much. You know, the dairy business, I always said the dairy business was like laying a straight ladder across the Grand Canyon and then running across it at full speed. If you missed a rung, you were in trouble. And it's so nice now to get up in the morning and fix a cup of coffee and walk outside and listen to the birds and watch the sun come up. I've never gotten out of the habit of rising early, much to the despair of my wife, who would like to sleep in if I would just stay in bed. But we manage. I get up and study. I've been trying to learn Spanish the last few years since I've been going to Honduras. I've realized how much I need to know how to communicate with those people. They always say a man that speaks 3 languages is a trilinguist. A person that speaks 2 languages is a bilingual. And a person that only speaks 1 language is an American. And that's so sad, because our school system just doesn't concentrate enough. When we have exchange students in from other countries, they can speak 6 or 7 languages, some of them. All of them can speak English as well as their native language. So anyway, I've really been working hard on my Spanish. And then I do a Bible study in the morning. And I watch Spanish TV a lot on my disc, my satellite dish. It keeps you in good practice. Oh, there's so many things to do. I despair sometimes when I see senior citizens who say, well, I'm going to turn it over to the younger generation now and let them do it. And I sometimes think that leads to an early demise. At least you don't think about yourself when you're so busy. And it's really easy to be busy in this life. You have to kind of defend yourself in a way and take time to smell the roses, as they say. I have really, truly enjoyed that. It's a luxury that I haven't had in 36 years of farming, and it is really wonderful. Okay, I just wonder if there isn't a lesson in this for everyone. I just don't know what I would do if I wasn't serving other people. I've always lived here by the side of the road, and we have a motto on the wall that said, let me live in a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. And I think that's one of the mottos that we tend to forget. We tend to become self-serving and selfish, but the real joy in life is really serving your fellow man. Christ said that. He said he has no need of anything. that we can give him. He said, you can only serve me by serving your fellow man. And I truly believe that. It's been very fulfilling. Okay. But she only does it when somebody's watching her. Yeah. And you know, because I think she's frustrated. I think she wants. Every once in a while you'll see some characteristic of those wild dogs down with their behind sticking up. And that's a characteristic of that wild dog. And then that high. Sheila. There she is. Rascal. Talk about a obsession.
Nope. Okay, now it is. Now? Mm-hmm.
Victor Echo 7, Easy Kilo. This is NN5Z, Roger. November 5, Zip.
Okay, November 5.
Victor Easy 7, Easy King.
November Germany. 0 Tango. NW2J, nice to hear you.
I'm getting a battery warning. Still want to use those other two orange ones?
I guess we'll have to, because I don't think that everyone's charged up yet.
W8 is your first contact.
NN5Z. November 5 Zulu.
Showed the frame, you know.
I didn't really want to show the frame, but I don't think I can do it.
There's a glare on it. See?
Z58, Z58, this is NN5Z, over. CQ, 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 CQ. This is November 5 Zulu. November 5 Zulu, over. This is the beginning of our last trip to Honduras to drill water wells. In Honduras, the greatest cause of death, even in adults and in young children, is intestinal parasites. And that's why we go down there to drill water wells as a volunteer project, so that they can have pure water, because they get their water from the rivers, and it is so polluted that the young children are destined to die at a young age. By the time they're 7, their stomachs are bloated and their eyes have shadows under them, and so it's a good thing to do what we can to get them clean water. The picture that we have here on the screen is the VOTEC at the seminary in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. Tegucigalpa is a city of about 700,000 people, but they have even in the large city, they have a great shortage of fresh water. So getting water is something that we try to do for every village. I've made 5 trips down there, and this last one is to Choluteca, which is over on the Pacific side of the country. It's at sea level, so it's very hot. Much of the temperatures ran around 120 degrees, and was very, very debilitating. But we did get 2 wells. This picture is at the VOTEC at the seminary, where we got our drilling rig ready to go. The next picture is a picture of the little village behind Tegucigalpa. It's called a colonia instead of a suburb, and unfortunately it's called the Colonia United States. Now this colonia is very poor. They have no sanitation. Only recently have they had running water in, and that is just to one point. They have one.
Okay, we're gonna have to cut.